sorry to Twitch heads who got excited thinking it was more Digimon. Bleh. Oh god, I didn't camera. I was a fool. I updated everything to be for Frankenstein, and do you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to hit that save button. So it was still saying that we were playing Digimon, which is a lie, because we're not. I hope I have my audio set up and you aren't hearing like all my computer bing bonging sounds as I set everything up. If you have a good stream to probably wind up falling asleep to, even if you're disappointed. I'm glad, Squatch. Okay, I should be here now. Okay, I am. Hello. I realized that I could probably set up the stream avatars on the bottom, and I figured out how to set it up so it includes YouTube as well. There's like both YouTube and Twitch here. It's book night, yeah. We're currently reading through Frankenstein. We're on chapter 5 right now. We'll do a little recap of what's gone down in the last little bit for anyone who's coming in new. I'm sure most of you were at least semi-familiar with Frankenstein, so it shouldn't be too hard to jump into. But yeah, it's just going to be a chill time. We're going to read for about like an hour and a half or so. That's usually how long we go for, unless I really lock in and my jaw doesn't start hurting. We might go for 2. I don't know. I know on Twitch, there should be in like the about section of the stream, there should be like a little thing where you can change your stream avatar. I don't know if I actually have that though. I'm not sure if I set that up, but it might be. There's like Digimon, Among Us, Animal Crossing in there. There's a good little mix of guys. There might be Pokemon, but don't trust me on that too much. All right, well, let me welcome in everyone proper. Hello, Lou on the YouTube side, Mantis, Determinant, Squatch, Alex, Tibiano, and Kingdom Hearts fan 100, and also Project Mutt. I don't think I've missed anyone, but yeah. Okay, last time on Frankenstein. So, Robert Walton, he's on a fishing boat, living his childhood dream. He sees a large mysterious figure going across the ice near the Antarctic during a storm, and he goes, "That's weird, that guy was really big." And like a couple days later, they find another man and another dog sled. This guy's a lot scrawnier though. It's Victor Frankenstein. After Robert helps him heal up, Victor Frankenstein's like, "I've had a terrible past. I've made big mistakes. I trust you. Let me sit down and talk to you about them." So we're reading through Robert's writings of Victor's story. And Victor is his dead mom wanted him to marry his cousin. He does love her. It's a little bit weird with that. There's a bit of incest going on with his love life, but that's okay in the grand scheme of everything Victor's done. Victor's gone to university. He's being very uppity about who he trusts, because there's Mr. Kremp, a professor, who's kind of ugly, so he doesn't trust him. But there's a beautiful other professor who he does trust, who gave him lab equipment, and he's really obsessed with extending life and creating it. And he got so obsessed, he spent months not writing home to anyone and figuring out how to create life. And he goes grave robbing to get parts. And he creates life. He creates Frankenstein's monster and then gets really scared and runs away. And when he's going to bed, he has a dream where he's kissing his the cousin soon-to-be wife. But then his cousin soon-to-be wife turns into his dead mother, and maggots start crawling out of his mouth because, he's been spending too much time with dead bodies. And he wakes up and he sees the monster he created in his room. So he runs out scared. And the next morning, he sees his old friend, Henry Clerval. Henry Clerval is #1 friend, absolute. And Henry Clerval is chatting with him in his room. But Victor Frankenstein has an absolute mental break after spending months researching dead bodies and bringing one to life and getting scared by it. He goes on a couple months hiatus with Henry Clerval being right there by his side to take care of him. He's now regained his sanity back, and I think that's where we left off. He kind of like got his sanity back, but he's like, I don't think I should tell Henry about this, because, oh boy, I've been through some stuff. And Henry's like, okay, yeah, you don't need to tell me. By the way, you should write home to your family. And Victor is like, I was going to do that. Why are you assuming that I wouldn't write back to my family? I'm going to read their letters and I'm going to write back to them right now. And that's where we left off. Delarianu. But yeah, that's I think a good enough recap. I need to start writing recaps beforehand, but hey, that's okay. All right. Are we ready to start with Chapter 5 in the Penguins Classic 2018 Frankenstein the 1818 text version? This will be page 52. If you are reading another book version of this, I unfortunately cannot help you find your page. But if you find Chapter 5, you'll be there. Muppet's looking very fancy today. Oh, you've dressed him up well, whoever did the last Muppet swap. Okay. I've taken a drink. I think I'm ready to get into this. Also, hello Elusive on the YouTube side. Chapter 5. Clerval then put the following letter into my hands. To thee, Frankenstein. My dear cousin, I cannot describe to you the uneasiness we have felt concerning your health. We cannot help imagining that your friend Clerval conceals the extent of your disorder, for it is now several months since we have seen your handwriting, and all this time you have been obliged to dictate your letters to Henry. Surely, Victor, you must have been exceedingly ill, and this makes us all very wretched, as much so nearly as after the death of your dear mother. My uncle was almost persuaded that you were indeed dangerously ill, and could hardly be restrained from taking a journey to Ingolstadt. Clerval always writes that you are getting better. I eagerly hope that you will confirm your intelligence soon in your own handwriting, for indeed, Victor, we are all very miserable on this account. Relieve us from this fear, and we shall be the happiest creatures in the world. Your father's health is now so vigorous that he has appeared 10 years younger since last winter. Ernest is also so much improved that you would hardly know him. He is now nearly 16, and he has lost his sickly appearance which he had some years ago. He has grown quite robust and active. My uncle and I conversed for a long time last night about what profession Ernest should follow. His constant illness when he was young has deprived him of habits of application, and now that he enjoys good health, he is continually in open air, climbing hills or rowing on the lake. I therefore propose that he should be a farmer, which, you know, cousin, is a favorite scheme of mine. A farmer's is a very happy life, and the least hurtful, or rather most beneficial profession of any. My uncle has an idea of his being educated and advocate, that through his interest he might become a judge. But besides that he is not all fitted for such occupation, it is certainly more creditable to cultivate the earth for sustenance of man than to be the confidant, and sometimes accomplice, of his vices, which is the profession of a lawyer. I said that the employments of a prosperous farmer, if they were not a more honourable, they were at least a happier species of occupation than that of a judge, whose misfortune was always to meddle with the dark side of human nature. My uncle smiled and said that I ought to be an advocate myself, which put an end to the conversation on that subject. And now I must tell you a little story that will please and perhaps amuse you. Do you not remember Justine Moritz? Probably you do not. I will relate her history, therefore, in a few words. Madame Moritz, her mother, was a widow of 4 children, of whom Justine was the third. The girl had always been the favourite of her father, but, through a strange perversity, her mother could not endure her, and after the death of M. Moritz, treated her very ill. My aunt observed this, and when Justine was of 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother to allow her to live in the house. The Republican institutions of our country have produced simpler and happier manners than those which prevail in the great monarchies that surround it. Hence, there is less distinction between the several classes and its inhabitants, and the lower orders being neither so poor nor despised, their manners are more refined and moral. A servant in Geneva does not mean the same thing as a servant in France and England. Justine, thus received in our family, learned the duties of a servant, a condition which, in our fortunate country, does not include the idea of ignorance, and a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being. After what I have said, I dare say you will remember the heroine of my little tale. For Justine was a great favourite of yours, and I recollect you once remarked that you were in an ill humour. One glance from Justine could dissipate it, for the same reason that Ariosto gives concerning beauty of Angelica. She looked so frank-hearted and happy. My aunt conceived a great attachment for her, by which she was induced to give her an education superior to that which she had first intended. This benefit was fully repaid. Justine was the most grateful little creature in the world. I do not mean that she made any professions. I never heard one pass her lips, but you could see by her eyes she almost adored her protectress. Although her disposition was gay, and in many respects inconsiderate, yet she paid the greatest attention to every gesture of my aunt. She thought her model of all excellence, and endeavoured to imitate her phraseology and manners, so that even now she often reminds me of her. When my dearest aunt died, everyone was too much occupied with their own grief to notice poor Justine, who had attended her during her illness with the most anxious affection. Poor Justine was very ill, but other trials were reserved for her. One by one, her brothers and sisters died, and her mother, with the exception of her neglected daughter, was left childless. The conscience of that woman was troubled. She began to think that the deaths of her favourites was a judgment from heaven to chastise her partiality. She was a Roman Catholic, and I believe her confessor confirmed the idea which she had conceived. Accordingly, a few months after your departure to Ingolstadt, Justine was called home by her repentant mother. Poor girl! She wept when she quitted our house. She was much altered since the death of my aunt. Grief had given softness and a whining mildness to her manners, which had before been remarkable for vivacity. Nor was her residence at her mother's house of a nature to restore her gaiety. The poor woman was just facilitating her repentance. She sometimes begged Justine to forgive her unkindness, but much oftener accused her of having caused their deaths of the brother and sister. Perpetual fretting at length threw Madame Moritz into a decline, which at first increased her irritability, but she is now at peace forever. She died on the first approach of cold weather at the beginning of last winter. Justine has returned to us, and I assure you I love her tenderly. She's very clever and gentle, and extremely pretty. As I mentioned before, her mind and her expressions constantly remind me of our dear aunt. I must say also a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. I wish you could see him. He's very tall for his age, with sweet laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes, and curling hair. When he smiles, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, which are rosy with health. He has already had 1 or 2 little wives, but Louisia Biron is his favourite, a pretty little girl of 5 years of age. Now, dear Victor, I dare say you wish to be indulged in a little gossip concerning the good people of Geneva. The pretty Miss Mansfield had already received her congratulatory visits on her approaching marriage with a young Englishman, John Melbourne-esque. Her ugly sister Manon married M. Duvillard, a rich banker, last autumn. Your favourite schoolfellow, Louis Manor, has suffered several misfortunes since the departure of Clerval from Geneva. But he has already recovered in his spirits, and is reported to be at the point of marrying a very lively, pretty Frenchwoman, Madame Tavernier. She is a widow, and much older than Manor, but she is much admired, and a favourite with everybody. I have ridden myself into good spirits, dear cousin, yet I cannot conclude without again anxiously inquiring concerning your health. Dear Victor, if you're not very ill, write yourself and make your father and all of us happy. Or, I cannot bear to think of the other side of the question. My tears already flow. Adieu, my dear cousin. Elizabeth Lavenza, Geneva, March 18th, 17. Dear Elizabeth, I claimed when I had read her letter. I will write instantly and relieve them from the anxiety they must feel. I wrote, and this exertion greatly fatigued me. But in my convalescence had commenced and proceeded regularly. In another fortnight I was able to leave my chamber. One of my first duties on my recovery was to introduce Clerval to the several professors of the university. In doing this, I underwent a kind of rough usage, ill befitting the wounds that my mind had sustained. Ever since the fatal night, the end of my labours, and the beginning of my misfortunes, I had conceived a violent antipathy, even to the name of natural philosophy. When I was otherwise quite restored to health, the sight of a chemical instrument would renew all the agony of my nervous symptoms. Henry saw this, and had removed all my apparatuses from my view. He had also changed my apartment, for he perceived that I had acquired a dislike for the room which had previously been my laboratory. But these cases of Clerval made of no avail when I visited the professors. M. Walden inflicted torture when he praised, and kindness and warmth, the astonishing progress I had made in the sciences. He soon perceived that I disliked the subject, but not guessing the real cause, he attributed my feelings to modesty, and changed the subject from my improvement to the science itself, with a desire, as I evidently saw, of drawing me out. What could I do? He meant to please, and he tormented me. I felt as if he had placed carefully, one by one, in my view those instruments which were to be afterwards used in putting me to a slow and cruel death. I reaved under his words, yet dared not exhibit the pain I felt. Clerval, whose eyes and feelings were always quick in discerning the sensations of others, declined the subject, alleging, in excuse, his total ignorance, and the conversation took a more general turn. I thanked my friend from my heart, but I did not speak. I saw plainly that he was surprised, but he never attempted to draw my secret from me, and although I loved him with a mixture of affection and reverence that knew no bounds, yet I could never persuade myself to confide in him the event which was so often present in my recollection, but which I fear to detail to another would only impress more deeply. M. Kremp was not equally docile, and in my condition at the time, of almost insupportable sensitiveness, his harsh, blunt encomiums gave me even more pain than the benevolent probation of M. Walden. "Done the fellow!" cried he. "Why, M. Clerval, I assure you he is outstripped us all. Aye, stare if you please, but it's nevertheless true. A youngster, who a few years ago believed Cornelius Agrippa as firmly as gospel, has now set himself at the head of the university, and if he is not so soon pulled down, we shall all be out of countenance. Aye, aye," continued he, observing my face expressive of suffering. "Frankenstein is modest, an excellent quality in young men. Young men should be diffident of themselves. You know M. Clerval, I myself when young, but that was out in a very short time." M. Kremp had now commenced a eulogy on himself, which happily turned the conversation from a subject that was so annoying to me. Clerval was no natural philosopher. His imagination was too vivid for the minutiae of science. Languages were his principal study, and he sought, by acquiring their elements, to open a field for self-instruction on his return to Geneva. Persian, Arabic, and Hebrew gained his attention, after he made himself perfectly master of Greek and Latin. For my own part, idleness had ever become irksome to me, and now I wished to fly from that reflection, and hated my former studies. I felt great relief in being the fellow pupil with my friend, and found not only instruction, but consolation in the works of Orientalists. Their melancholy is soothing, and their joy elevating to a degree I never experienced in studying the authors of any other country. When you read their writings, life appears to consist in a warm sun and garden of roses, in the smiles and frowns of a fair enemy, and the fire that consumes your own heart. How different from the manly and heroical poetry of Greece and Rome. Summer passed away in these occupations, and my return to Geneva was fixed for the latter end of autumn. But, being delayed by several accidents, winter and snow arrived, and the roads were deemed impassable, and my journey was retarded until the ensuing spring. I felt this delay very bitterly, for I longed to see my native town and my beloved friends. My return had only been delayed so long from an unwillingness to leave Clerval in a strange place before I become acquainted with any of its inhabitants. The winter, however, was spent cheerfully, and although the spring was uncommonly late when it came, its beauty compensated for its dilatoriness. The month of May had already commenced, and I expected the letter daily which was to fix the date of my departure, when Henry proposed a pedestrian tour in the envious region of Ingolstadt, that I might bid a personal farewell to the country I had so long inhabited. I acceded with pleasure of this proposition. I was fond of exercise, and Clerval had always been my favourite companion in the rabbles of this nature, and I had taken among the scenery of my native country. We passed a fortnight in these perambulations. My health and spirits had long been restored, and they gained additional strength from the salubrious air I breathed, a natural instance of our progress, and the conversation of my friend. Study had before secluded me from the intercourse of my fellow creatures, and rendered me unsocial. But Clerval called forth the better feelings of my heart. He again taught me to love the aspect of nature, and the cheerful faces of children. Excellent friend! How sincerely did you love me, and endeavour to elevate my mind until it was on a level of your own. A selfish pursuit had cramped and narrowed me, until your gentleness and affection warmed and opened my senses. I became the same happy creature who, a few years ago, loving and beloved by all, had no sorrow or care. When happy inanimate nature had power of bestowing on me the most delightful sensations, a serene sky and verdant fields filled me with ecstasy. The present season was indeed divine. The flowers of spring bloomed in the hedges, while those of summer were already in bud. I was undisturbed by thoughts which during the preceding year had pressed upon me, notwithstanding my endeavours to throw them off, with invincible burden. Henry rejoiced in my gaiety, and sincerely sympathized in my feelings. He exerted himself to amuse me, while he expressed the sensations that filled his soul. The resources of his mind on this occasion were truly astonishing. His conversation was full of imagination, and very often, in imitation of the Persian and Arabic writers, he invented tales of wonderful fancy and passion. At other times, he repeated my favourite poems or drew me out into arguments, which he supported with great ingenuity. We returned to our college on a Sunday afternoon. The peasants were dancing, and every one we met appeared gay and happy. My own spirits were high, and I bounded along with feelings of unbridled joy and hilarity. Chapter end. All right, that was chapter number 5. Welcome in, Kairu Borgard. You joined in for reading. We're reading a book together. Well, I'm reading. I don't actually know what you guys are doing. And then look, Country Shaped Media. Yeah, this is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Everything's looking up for our boy Victor Frankenstein right now. We got some gossip from back in Geneva from Elizabeth. And we got... Well, I mean, the professor's wasn't very good for him, but he had a great time with Clerval. I'll say it again, I really think Mary Shelley is like a Fujoshi, because I mean, the way that she's writing these male friendships, it's admirable. Sometimes I think Victor just says a few too many things that make me like raise an eyebrow and go like, Using this as background music, what intonation have you been hearing? Yeah. There was... I'm gonna have to look up, because there was a word that is like a slur, but it wasn't like used as a slur. So I did read it just to be accurate to the text. Um, but I've never seen it like used in that context, so very, very intriguing. Am I reading on screen or do I have the book in my hands? I have the book in my hands. I've got a physical book. I've got really good like audio gates, so I don't know if the ASMR of like the book pages. I don't know if that's coming through or not. But yeah, I got the physical book in my hands right now. I was thinking of doing, because I bought a camera for hand cam stream Lego building. I was debating putting the hand cam stream on for this. You can hear the book? Okay, good. But the problem is I hold the book up and I don't like reading it when it's on my desk. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to like, I hold it close to my face because I'm a little bit blind. If the tracking cuts out, that's why, because I'm holding it up to my face. Because I'm blind as a bat sometimes. I was debating it though. I can try and set it up for next week if people would like, but I don't think you guys will be able to read the words on the book even if I do it in a hand cam. So I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it. You should be able to find online copies of this book since it's in the public domain. If you're wanting to read along, I can quickly look that up for you during our little mid-chapter break. Donate book online. Because I'm sure there should be free versions since it is public domain. This has terrible formatting, but I mean, wait, the chapters are wrong though, because chapter 6 is what we just read in chapter 5. I'd link this one, but the chapters aren't correct in it. Chapter 5, chapter 6. This is so... I think my book is different. My chapter 6 is a lot of people's chapter 7. Huh. Well, it's a good thing I've been saying exactly what copy of the book I'm reading. It's very good. I don't know why this one's different. Maybe this combined 2 chapters into one? Very likely. Huh. I don't know. But hello, welcome in anyone who's just joined. We're in a little mid-chapter break. We're gonna start chapter 6, or for some people, chapter 7. I guess I'll link the literature. I'll link this for people. Cooked copy. Hey, I got this from my university. Why can't I send this link? It's not letting me send it. There you go. I sent it to the Twitch side. A little link. Yeah, just with that link, you'll always be a chapter ahead of me for some reason. So it'll be chapter 7 for you that we're about to start. Oh my goodness. Let me properly read chat. I got very distracted. I got very distracted looking up chapter. I read so fast. I'll try and slow down. If I'm reading too fast, I'll try and go slower. Because I've been tripping over words because I feel like I'm reading too slow, so I've been trying to go faster. But if I'm going too fast, I can slow it down. All you guys have like put on regular Muppet. Alright. But yeah, let me take another drink and get on to chapter number 6. I'm also, before I forget, I'm gonna mute alerts. I remember that very late that I need to to mute up the alerts so we don't have those. There is the problem of... No, that should be fine. Yeah, all the noise alerts should be gone. Okay. One more drink, and then chapter number 6/7. Okay, this does have a lot of Victor's father speaking. I'm gonna try and do a voice that's not gonna wreck me. On my return, I found the following letter from my father. To thee, Frankenstein. My dear Victor, you've probably waited impatiently for a letter to fix the date of your return to us. I was at first tempted to write only a few lines, mentioning merely the day of which I would expect you. But that would be a cruel kindness, and I dare not do it. What would be your surprise, my son, when you expected a happy and gay welcome, to behold, on contrary, tears and wretchedness? And how, Victor, can I relate our misfortune? Absence cannot have rendered your callous to joys and grief, and how shall I inflict pain on an absent child? I wish to prepare you for the woeful news, but I know it's impossible. Even now your eye skims over the page, to seek the words which are to convey you the horrible tidings. William's dead! A sweet child whose smiles delighted and warmed the heart. So gentle yet so gay. Victor, he is murdered! I will not attempt to console you, but will simply relate the circumstances of the transaction. Late Thursday, May 7th, I, my niece and your 2 brothers went to walk in the plain Palais. The evening was warm and serene, and we prolonged our walk further than usual. It was already dusk before we thought of returning, and then when we discovered that William and Ernest, who had gone on before, were not to be found. We accordingly rested on the seat until they should return. Presently, Ernest came and inquired if we had seen his brother. He said that they'd been playing together, and that William had run away to hide himself, that he vainly sought for him, and afterwards waited for a long time, but that he did not return. This account rather alarmed us, and we continued to search for him until night fell, when Elizabeth conjectured that he might have returned to the house. He was not there. We returned again with torches, for I could not rest when I thought my sweet boy had lost himself and was exposed to all the damps and dews of night. Elizabeth also suffered extreme anguish. About 5 in the morning, I discovered my lovely boy, whom the night before I had seen blooming in active health, stretched on the grass, livid and motionless, his print of the murderer's finger on his neck. He was conveyed home, and the anguish that was still visible in my countenance betrayed the secret to Elizabeth. She was very earnest to see the corpse. At first I attempted to prevent her, but she persisted, and entered the room where it lay, hastily examined the neck of the victim, clasping her hands. She said, "Oh God, I have murdered the darling infant." She fainted, and was restored with extreme difficulty. When she again lived, it was to only weep and sigh. She told me that same evening William had teased her to let him wear a very valuable miniature that she possessed from your mother. This picture was gone, and was doubtless the temptation which urged the murderer to the deed. We have no trace of him at present, although our exertions to discover him are unremitted. They will not restore my beloved William. Come, my dear Victor, you alone can console Elizabeth. She continuously weeps, and accuses herself unjustly as the cause of his death. Her words pierce my heart. We are all unhappy, but will that not be an additional motive for you, my son, to return and be our comforter? Your dear mother. Alas, Victor, I now say, thank God she did not live to witness this cruel and miserable death of her youngest darling. Come, Victor, not brooding thoughts of vengeance against the assassin, but with feelings of peace and gentleness that heal instead of festering wounds of our minds. Enter the house of mourning, my friend, but with kindness and affection for those who love you, and not with hatred of your enemies. Your affectionate and afflicted father, Alphonse Frankenstein. Geneva, May 12th, 17. Clerval, who had watched my countenance as I read the letter, was surprised to observe the despair that succeeded to the joy I first expressed on receiving news from my friends. I threw the letter on the table and covered my face with my hands. "My dear Frankenstein," exclaimed Henry, when he perceived me weep with bitterness, "are you always to be unhappy? My dear friend, what has happened?" I motioned for him to take up the letter while I walked up and down the room in extreme agitation. Tears also gushed from the eyes of Clerval as he read the account of my misfortune. "I can offer you no consolation, my friend," said he. "Your disaster is irreparable. What do you intend to do?" "To go to Geneva. Come with me, Henry, to order the horses." During our walk, Clerval endeavoured to raise my spirits. He did not do this by common topics of consolation, but by exhibiting the truest sympathy. "Poor William," said he, "that dear child, he now sleeps with his angel mother. His friends mourn and weep, but he is at rest. He does not feel the murderer's grasp. A sod covers his gentle form. He knows not pain. He can no longer be a fit subject for pity. The survivors are the greatest sufferers, and for them time is the only consolation. Those maxims of Stoics, that death was not evil, and the mind of man ought to be superior to despair on the eternal absence of beloved object, ought not be urged. Even Cato wept over the dead body of his brother." Clerval spoke thus as we hurried through the streets, and the words impressed themselves on my mind, and I remembered them afterwards in solitude. But now, as soon as the horses arrived, I hurried into the carriole and bade farewell to my friend. My journey was very melancholy. At first I wished to hurry on, for I longed to console and sympathize with my loved and sorrowing friends, but when I drew near my native town, I slackened my progress. I could hardly sustain the multitude of feelings that crowded into my mind. I passed through the scenes familiar to my youth, but which I had not seen for nearly 6 years. How altered everything might be during that time. One sudden and desolating change had taken place, but 1,000 little circumstances might have, by degrees, also worked other alterations, which, although they were done more tranquilly, might not be the less decisive. Fear overcame me. I dared not advance, dreading 1,000 nameless evils that made me tremble, although I was unable to define them. I remained 2 days in Lausanne, in this painful state of mind. I contemplated the lake. The waters were placid, all around calm, and the snowy mountains. The places of nature were not changed. By degrees, the calm and heavenly scene restored me, and I continued my journey towards Geneva. The road ran by the side of the lake, which became narrower as I approached my native town. I discovered more distinctly the black sides of Jura and the bright summit of Mont Blanc. I wept like a child. "Dear mountain, my own beautiful lake, how do you welcome your wanderer? Your summits are clear, the sky and lake are blue and placid. Is this to prognosticate peace, or mock my unhappiness? I fear, my friend, that I shall render my tedious by dwelling on these preliminary circumstances, but they were days of comparative happiness, and I think of them with pleasure. My light, I took in again beholding thy streams, thy mountains, and more than all, thy lovely lake. Yet, as I drew nearer home, grief and fear again overcame me. Night also closed around, and when I could hardly see the dark mountains, I still felt more gloomy. The picture appeared a vast and dim scene of evil, and I foresaw obscurely that I was destined to become the most wretched of human beings. Alas, I prophesied truly, and failed only in one single circumstance, that in all misery I imagined and dreaded, I did not conceive the 100th part of the anguish I was destined to endure. I was completely dark when I arrived in the environs of Geneva. The gates of the town were already shut, and I was obliged to pass the night of Secheron, a village half at league to the east of the city. The sky was serene, and I was unable to rest. I resolved to visit the spot where my poor William had been murdered, as I could not pass for the town. I was obliged to cross the lake in a boat to arrive at Plain Palace. During this short voyage, I saw the lightning playing on the summit of Mont Blanc in the most beautiful figures. A storm appeared to approach rapidly, and on landing, I ascended a low hill that I might observe its progress. It advanced. The heavens were clouded, and I soon felt rain coming down slowly in large drops, but its violence quickly increased. I quitted my seat and walked on. Although darkness and storm increased every minute, and the thunder burst with a terrific crash over my head, it echoed from the Salve and Juras and the Alps of Savoy. The vivid flashes of lightning dazzled my eyes, illuminating the lake, making it appear like a vast sheet of fire. And then, for an instant, everything seemed of a pitchy darkness until the eye recovered itself from the preceding flash. The storm, as is often the case in Switzerland, appeared at once in various parts of the heavens. The most violent storm hung exactly north of the town, over the part of the lake which lies between the promontory of the Belle Rive and the village of Coppet. Another storm enlightened Jura with faint flashes. Another darkened and sometimes disclosed the mole, a peaked mountain to the east of the lake. While I watched the storm, so beautiful and terrific, I wandered on with a hasty step. The noble war in the sky elevated my spirits. I clasped my hands and exclaimed aloud, "William, my dear angel, this is thy funeral! This is thy dirge!" As I said these words, I perceived in the gloom a figure which stole from behind a clump of trees near me. I stood fixed, gazing intently. I could not be mistaken. A flash of lightning illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me, a gigantic stature, and the deformity of its aspect, more hideous than belongs to humanity, instantly informed me that it was the wretch, the filthy demon who I had given life. What did he there? Could he be— I shuddered at the conception— the murderer of my brother? No sooner did that idea cross my imagination than I became convinced of its truth. My teeth chattered, and I was forced to lean against a tree for support. The figure passed me quickly, and I lost it in the gloom. Nothing in human shape could have destroyed that fair child. He was the murderer. I could not doubt it. The mere presence of the idea was an irresistible proof of the fact. I thought of pursuing the devil, but it would have been in vain, for another flash discovered him to me, hanging among the rocks of the nearly perpendicular ascent of Mont Slave, a hill that bounds Plain Palace on the south. He soon reached the summit and disappeared. I remained motionless. The thunder ceased, but the rain still continued, and the scene was enveloped in an impenetrable darkness. I revolved in my mind the events which I had until now sought to forget, the whole train of my progress towards creation, the appearance of the work in my own hands alive at my bedside, its departure. 2 years had now nearly elapsed since that night of which he first received life. And was this his first crime? Alas! I had turned loose into the world a depraved wretch whose delight was in carnage and misery. Had he not murdered my brother? No one can conceive the anguish I suffered during the remainder of the night, which I spent cold and wet in the open air. But I did not feel the inconvenience of the weather. My imagination was busy in scenes of evil and despair. I considered the being whom I had cast among mankind and endowed with the will and power to effect purposes of horror, such as the deed he had now done, nearly in the light of my own vampire, my own spirit let loose from the grave, and forced to destroy all that was dear to me. Day dawned, and I directed my steps towards town. The gates were opened, and I hastened to my father's house. My first thought was to discover what I now knew of the murder, and cause instant pursuit to he made. But I paused, and reflected on the story I had to tell. A being whom I myself had formed and endued with life had met me at midnight among the precipices of inaccessible mountain. I remembered also the nervous fever which I had been seized just at the time I dated my creation, and which would give an air of delirium to a tale otherwise so utterly improbable. I well knew that if any other had communicated such relation to me, I should have looked upon it as the ravings of insanity. Besides, the strange nature of the animal would elude all pursuit, even if I were so far credited as to persuade my relatives to commence it. Besides, of what use would be pursuit? Who could arrest a creature capable of scaling the overhanging sides of Mount Selv? These reflections determined me, and I resolved to remain silent. I'm going to take a quick drink. All right. It was about 5 in the morning when I entered my father's house. I told the servants not to disturb the family and went into the library to attend the usual hour of rising. 6 years had elapsed, passed as a dream, but for one inedible trace, and I stood in the same place where I had last embraced my father before my departure to Ingolstadt. Beloved and respectable parent, he still remained to me. I gazed on the picture of my mother, who stood over the mantelpiece. It was a historical subject, painted at my father's desire, and represented Caroline Buford in agony and despair, kneeling by the coffin of her dead father. Her garb was rustic, and her cheek pale, but there was an air of dignity and beauty that hardly permitted in sentiment of pity. Below this picture was a miniature of William. My tears flowed when I looked upon it. While I was thus engaged, Ernest entered. He had heard me arrive and hastened to welcome me. He expressed a sorrowful delight to see me. "Welcome, my dearest Victor," said he. "Ah, I wish you had come 3 months ago, and then you would have found us all joyous and delighted. But we are now unhappy, and I am afraid tears instead of smiles will be your welcome. Our father looked so sorrowful. The dreadful event seemed to have revived in his mind the grief of the death of Mamma. Poor Elizabeth is quite inconsolable." Ernest began to weep as he said these words. "Do not," said I, "welcome me thus. Try to be more calm, that I may not absolutely miserable the moment I enter my father's house after such a long absence. But tell me, how does my father support his misfortunes, and how is my poor Elizabeth?" "She indeed requires consolation. She accused herself of having caused the death of my brother, and that made her very wretched. But since the murderer has been discovered—" "The murderer has been discovered? Good God, how can that be? Who could attempt to pursue him? It is impossible. One might as well try and overtake the winds or confine a mountain stream with straw." "I do not know what you mean. But we were all very unhappy when she was discovered. No one would believe it at first, and even now Elizabeth will not be convinced, notwithstanding all the evidence. Indeed, who would credit Justine Moritz, so amiable and fond of the family, could at once become so extremely wicked?"
Justine Moritz. Justine Moritz? Poor girl. Is she the accused? But it is wrongfully. Everyone knows that. No one believes it, surely, Ernest. No one did at first, but several circumstances came out that have almost forced conviction upon us, and her own behavior has been so confused as to add to the evidence of facts a weight that, I fear, leaves no hope for doubt. But she will be tried today, and you will then hear all.
He related that, on the morning of the murder of poor William had been discovered, Justine had taken ill and confined to her bed, and after several days one of the servants happening to examine the apparel she had worn on the night of the murder, and discovered in her pocket the picture of my mother, which had been judged to be the temptation of the murderer. The servant instantly showed it to one of the others, who, without saying a word to any of the family, went to a magistrate, and upon their deposition, Justine was apprehended. On being charged with the fact, the poor girl confirmed the suspicion in a great measure by her extreme confusion of the matter. This was a strange tale, but it did not shake my faith, and I replied earnestly,
You are all mistaken. I know the murderer. Justine, poor, good Justine, is innocent.
At that instant my father entered. I saw unhappiness deeply impressed into his countenance, but he endeavored to welcome me cheerfully, and, after we exchanged our mournful greeting, would have introduced some other topic than that of our disaster, had Ernest not exclaimed,
Good God, Papa! William says he knows who the murderer of poor William.
We do also, unfortunately,
replied my father.
For indeed I had rather have been ever so ignorant than have discovered so much depravity and ingratitude in one I valued so highly.
My dear father, you are mistaken. Justine is innocent.
If she is, God forbid that she should suffer as guilty. She is to be tried today, and I sincerely hope, that she will be acquitted.
This speech calmed me, and I was firmly convinced in my own mind that Justine, and indeed every human being, was guiltless of this murder. I had no fear, therefore, that any circumstantial evidence could be brought forward strong enough to convict her, and, in this assurance, I calmed myself, expecting a trial with eagerness, but without prognosticating an evil result. We were soon joined by Elizabeth. Time had made great alterations to her form since I last beheld her. 6 years before, she had been a pretty, good-humoured girl, whom everyone loved and caressed. She was now a woman in stature, an expression of countenance, which was uncommonly lovely. An open and capacious forehead gave indications of a good understanding, joined to great frankness of disposition. Her eyes were hazel, and expressive of mildness, which, through recent affliction, allied to sadness. Her hair was a rich dark auburn, her complexion fair, and her figure slight and graceful. She welcomed me with greatest affection. "Your arrival, my dear cousin," she said, "fills me with hope. You perhaps will find some means to justify poor guiltless Justine. Alas! Who is safe if she be convicted to crime? I rely on her innocence as certainly as I do upon my own. Our misfortune is doubly hard to us. We have not only lost that lovely darling boy, but this poor girl, who I sincerely love, is to be torn away by an even worse fate. If she is condemned, I shall never know joy more. But she will not. I am sure she will not. And then I shall be happy again, even after the sad death of my little William."
"She is innocent, my Elizabeth,"
I said,
"and that shall be proved. Fear nothing, but let your spirits be cheered by the assurance of her acquittal."
"How kind you are! Everyone else believes in her guilt, and that made me wretched, for I know it was impossible. To see everyone so prejudiced in so deeply a manner rendered me hopeless and despairing." She wept.
"Sweet niece," said my father, "dry your tears. If she is, as you believe, innocent, rely on the justice of our judges, and the activity which I shall prevent with the slightest shadow of partiality."
That was chapter 6/7 to some people. Oh my goodness, and welcome in Super Static Fox. And also thank you so much for the follow from a certain Yeti 23 minutes ago. I'm very late in saying Thank you to that. I turned off my notifications and alerts. Well, I turned off the sound for them, so I didn't hear it. Welcome in, Agons. I'm doing good. We're just reading some more Dracula. Taking a little short chapter break. Oh, the tournament. It's certainly something to see this stripped of the trappings set by Universal 1930s movie. It feels more eerie and elemental, like you can't even tell if Victor's hallucinating. I know. That's the, Oh, you did it right after I started reading. Ah, gotcha. Well, thank you, and welcome in. Yeah, I do really like... This was a very long chapter. A lot happened. William died. Victor's back in Geneva. We saw his monster again. Ooh, that was a very spooky scene. I was getting a few little chills reading that. It set the scene very well. I've never seen the Frankenstein movies. I know there's like a lot of them. I think they're mostly by Universal, but I'm sure there's some like individual ones. I've never seen the movie, so I don't know exactly how they go about in adapting. I know they usually give Victor a little sidekick minion guy, but... And they also change how Frankenstein looks. Because right now he's kind of just a sewn together zombie guy. He doesn't have all the bolts and stuff. But yeah. We're about to, I think, see a court trial, though. Because you're about to see if little old Justine is going to be found innocent of murder. Victor is making a lot of jumping to conclusions. He's jumping to conclusions a lot on the murder of his little brother, but I can't press him too much on that because I won't lie. When I read that William died, I was like, oh my god, I think I've got the same conspiratorial brain as Victor, because I was like, oh my god, it was Frankenstein's monster, wasn't it? It was Frankenstein's monster. He somehow tracked down his dad's family and is killing them because his dad hates him. And his dad abandoned him and left him alone in the woods for 2 years. Oh, man. These streams would have been helpful in your senior year when you were too lazy to read the book. They would have been helpful, but I'm not sure if you would have fully, like, comprehended. Because I find with audiobooks, I need to be, like, reading along for it to, like, properly sink in my head. It's hard. Some people process things differently, though, so because I use this book for university, every now and again I flip to a page and there's just a because I have like little sticky notes in here, just like small little like arrows with stuff written on it. So every now and again I have to like just peel it off and be like, ooh, that's not supposed to be there. I can't read the words, it's covering stuff. Back from when I had to write essays. Wrote a big old essay. I think I wrote an essay comparing this and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the themes in those. I can't fully remember what I had to do an essay on for this book. I just know I had to. And I got a 0 on it. I would have gotten an A. I would have got the highest grade in the class, but I didn't write a rough draft. Because I'm not about that lifestyle. So I got a 0. It wasn't it was not a good teacher in that class in university. I occasionally bring up this story just because I'm still salty over. Wait, was it my fault for not even like making a fake rough draft? It's because I missed the day when people were like going over each other's rough draft. So like, A, I didn't have a rough draft to show, and B, I didn't have anyone from class look it over because I didn't know anyone in class and I have social anxiety. So I was like, well, damn. Which sucks because I'm just like, the teacher even said it was like the best one in class and would have got the highest marks, but he wouldn't give me the grade because I didn't do a rough draft. I'm like, well, obviously I didn't need it. Obviously I didn't need the rough draft. It was the best one, but I digress. Yeah, losing marks for that sucked. Yeah. University wasn't for me. It wasn't for me in a lot of ways. Man. Young Frankenstein is good, but highly unrecognizable compared to this. I've never... Young Frankenstein. Is that like Frankenstein, but they're all babies? That's just what I'm imagining young Sheldon, but Frankenstein. You love to have post-secondary ed wrecked because talking to people's hard. Yeah. It's rough for me. Ooh, Aegon's, you failed so many essays because you couldn't stretch your writing to the minimum length. Oh, Young Frankenstein's a comedy starring Willy Wonka guy. Oh. Interesting. Okay. I'm gonna do some jaw stretches, a little jaw massage, and then we'll get on to chapter 7. In my copy, for some people, if you're like, hey, I'm trying to read along and this isn't feeling like chapter 7, go to chapter 8. The chapters are different in this book. I'm always a chapter behind everyone else for some reason. This is the Penguins Classic version from 2018, the 1818 text. Maybe because it's the 1818 text that is different? Who knows? Because it is more... Oh, I need to check a notification very quick. It's definitely a version that keeps all of the old-timiness of the words and spellings. Yeah. Because a lot of it, like, when it says shown, it's spelled S-H-E-W-N. Which is, like... It's just, like, you know, it's 1818. Sometimes things just are spelled like that, which does add to, if you see me just like pausing on a word, it might be, if I pause on a word and then it's just like a normal regular word, it might just be that the word is spelled kind of different and my brain's taking an extra second to process what it's supposed to be. Because there are some just strange grammar stuff in this. Okay. I gotta go silent while I quickly jaw massage and then jump into chapter 7/8. Okay. This will probably be our last chapter. Let me just see how long it is. Oh! This will be our last chapter, and it will be finishing volume 1. So next week we'll be starting volume 2. So that means I think we're like about halfway. Because if that's volume 1, I don't think there's 3 volumes. I think there's just 2. Oh, that's exciting. We're not halfway because it's like 200 pages. We're not yet at 100, but... Chapter 7/8. We passed a few sad hours until 11 o'clock when the trial was to commence. My father and the rest of the family being obliged to attend as witnesses, I accompanied them to court. During the whole of this wretched mockery of justice, I suffered living torture. It was to be decided whether the result of my curiosity and lawless devices would cause the death of 2 of my fellow beings. One, a smiling babe, full of innocence and joy. The other far more dreadfully murdered, with every aggravation of infamy that could make the murder memorable and horror. Justine was a girl of merit, and possessed qualities which promised to render her life happy. Now all was to be obliterated in an ignominious way, and I the cause. 1,000 times rather would I have confessed myself guilty of the crime ascribed to Justine, but I was absent when it was committed, and such declaration would have been considered as the ravings of a madman. and would not have exculpated her who suffered through me. The appearance of Justine was calm. She was dressed in mourning, and her countenance, always engaging, was rendered by the solemnity of her feelings exquisitely beautiful. She appeared confident in innocence, and did not tremble, although gazed on by rated by thousands, for all the kindness which her beauty might otherwise have excited was obliterated in their mind of the spectators by the imagination of enormity that she was supposed to have committed. She was tranquil, yet her tranquillity was evidently constrained, and as her confusion had before been adduced as proof of her guilt, she worked up to her mind to an appearance of courage. When she entered court, she threw her eyes round it, and quickly discovered where we were seated. A tear seemed to dim her eye when she saw us, but she quickly recovered herself, and a look of sorrowful affection seemed to attest her utter guiltlessness. The trial began, and after the advocate against her stated the charge, several witnesses were called. Several strange facts combined against her, which might have staggered anyone who had not such proof of her innocence as I had. She had been out the whole night on which the murder had been committed, and towards morning had been perceived by a market woman not far from the spot where the body of the murdered child had afterwards been found. The woman asked her what she did there, but she looked very strangely, and only returned a confused and unintelligible answer. She returned to the house at about 8 o'clock, and when one inquired where she had passed the night, she replied that she had been looking for the child, and demanded earnestly if anything had been heard concerning him. When shown the body, she fell into violent hysterics and kept her bed for several days. The picture was then produced, which the servant had found in her pocket. And when Elizabeth, in a faltering voice, proved that it was the same which an hour before the child had been missed, she had placed round her neck, a murmur of horror and indignation filled the court. Justine was called on for her defense. As the trial had proceeded, her countenance had altered. Surprise, horror, and misery were strongly expressed. Sometimes she struggled with her tears, but when she was desired to plead, she collected her powers and spoke in an audible, although variable voice. "God knows," said she, "how entirely I am innocent, but I do not pretend that my protestations should acquit me. I rest my innocence on a plain and simple explanation of the facts which have been adduced against me, and I hope the character I have always borne will incline my judges to a favourable interpretation where any circumstance appears doubtful or suspicious." She then related that, by the permission of Elizabeth, she had passed the evening on the night of which the murder had been committed at the house of an aunt at Cheyne, a village situated about a league from Geneva. On her return at about 9 o'clock, she had met a man who had asked her if she had seen anything of the child who was lost. She was alarmed by this account, and passed several hours in looking for him, when the gates of Geneva were shut, and she was forced to remain several hours of the night in a barn belonging to a cottage, being unwilling to call upon the inhabitants, to whom she was well known. Unable to rest or sleep, she quitted her asylum early, and she might again endeavour to find my brother. If she had gone near the spot where his body lay, it was without her knowledge. That she had been bewildered when questioned by the market woman was not surprising. Since she had passed a sleepless night, the fate of poor William was uncertain. Concerning the picture, she could give no account. "I know," continued the unhappy victim, "how heavily and fatally this one circumstance weighs against me, but I have no power of explaining it. When I have expressed my utter ignorance, I am only left to conjecture concerning the probabilities of which it might have been placed in my pocket. But here also I am checked. I believe that I have no enemy on earth, and none surely would have been so wicked to destroy me as so wantonly. Did the murderer place it there? I know of no opportunity afforded him for doing so. Or, if I had, why should I have stolen the jewel and not part with it again so soon? I commit my cause to justice of my judges, yet I see no room for hope. I beg permission to have a few witnesses examined concerning my character, and if their testimony should not overweigh my supposed guilt, I must be condemned, although I would plead my salvation on my innocence." Several witnesses were called, who had known her for many years, and they spoke well of her, but fear and hatred of the crime of which they supposed her guilty rendered them timorous and unwilling to come forward. Elizabeth saw even this last resource, her excellent dispositions and irreproachable conduct, about to fail the accused, when, although violently agitated, she desired permission to address the court.
I am, said she, the cousin of the unhappy child who was murdered, or rather his sister, for I was educated by and have lived with his parents ever since and even long before his birth. It may therefore be judged indecent of me to come forward on this occasion, but when I see a fellow creature about to perish through cowardness of her pretended friends, I wish to be allowed to speak, that I may know of her character. I am well acquainted with the accused. I have lived in the same house with her, at one time for 5, and at another time for nearly 2 years. During all that period, she appeared to me the most amiable and benevolent of human creatures. She nursed Madame Frankenstein, my aunt, in her last illness with greatest affection and care, and afterwards attended to her own mother during a tedious illness, in a manner that excited the admiration of all who knew her. After which she again lived in my uncle's house, where she was beloved by all the family. She was warmly attached to the child who was now dead, and acted towards him like the most affectionate mother. For my own part, I do not hesitate to say that, notwithstanding all the evidence produced against her, I believe and rely on her perfect innocence. She had no temptations for such action, and to bauble, on which the chief proof rests, if she had so earnestly desired it, I should have willingly given it to her. So much do I esteem and value her. Excellent, Elizabeth. A murmur of approbation was heard, but it was excited by her generous interference, and not in favor of poor Justine, of whom public indignation was turned with renewed violence, charging her with the blackest ingratitude. She herself wept as Elizabeth spoke, but she did not answer. My own agitation and anguish was extreme during the whole trial. I believed in her innocence. I knew it. Could the demon who had, I did not for a minute doubt, murdered my brother, also in his hellish sport have betrayed the innocent to death and ignominy? I could have sustained the horror of my situation, and when I perceived that popular voice and the countenances of the judges had already condemned my unhappy victim, I rushed out of the court in agony. The tortures of the accused did not equal mine. She was sustained by innocence, but the fangs of remorse tore my bosom and would not forgo their hold. I passed a night in unmingled wretchedness. In the morning I went to the court. My lips and throats were parched. I dared not ask the fatal question, but I was known, and the officer guessed the cause of my visit. The ballots had been thrown, and they were all black, and Justine was condemned. I cannot pretend to describe what I then felt. I had before experienced sensations of horror, and I have endeavored to bestow them adequate expressions, but words cannot convey the idea of a heart-sickening despair that I then endured. The person to whom I addressed myself added that Justine had already confessed her guilt.
That evidence, he observed, was hardly required in so glaring a case, but I am glad of it. And indeed, none of the judges like to condemn a criminal upon circumstantial evidence, be it ever so decisive.
When I returned home, Elizabeth eagerly demanded the result.
My cousin, replied I, it is decided that you may have expected. All judges had rather that 10 innocent should suffer than 1 guilty should escape. But she has confessed.
This was a dire blow to poor Elizabeth, who had relied with firmness upon Justine's innocence.
Alas, she said, how shall I ever again believe in human benevolence? Justine, who I loved and esteemed as my sister, how could she put on those smiles of innocence only to betray? Her mild eyes seem incapable of any severity or ill humor, and yet she has committed a murder.
Soon after we heard the poor victim had expressed a wish to see my cousin, my father wished her not to go, but said that he had left it to her own judgment and feelings to decide.
Yes, said Elizabeth, I will go although she's guilty, and you, Victor, shall accompany me. I cannot go alone.
The idea of this visit was torture to me, yet I could not refuse. We entered the gloomy prison chamber and beheld Justine sitting on some straw at the further end. Her hands were manacled and her head rested on her knees. She rose on seeing us enter, and when we were left alone with her, she threw herself at the feet of Elizabeth, weeping bitterly. My cousin wept also. "Oh, Justine," she said, "why did you rob me of my last consolation? I relied on your innocence, and although I was very wretched, I was not so miserable as I am now." "And do you also believe that I am so very, very wicked? Do you also join with my enemies to crush me?" Her voice suffocated with sobs. "Rise, my poor girl," said Elizabeth. "Why do you kneel if you are innocent? I am not one of your enemies. I believed you guiltless, notwithstanding every evidence, until I heard that you yourself declared your guilt. The report, you say, is false, and be assured, Justine, that nothing shall shake my confidence in you for a moment but your own confession." "I did confess, but I confessed a lie. I confessed that I might obtain absolution, but now that falsehood lies heavier at my heart than all other sins, that God of heaven forgive me. Ever since I was condemned, my confessor had besieged me. He threatened and menaced until I had almost begun to think that I was the monster he said I was. He threatened excommunication and hellfire in my last moments if I continued obdurate. Dear lady, I had none to support me. All looked on me as a wretched doomed to ignominy and perdition. What could I do? In an evil hour, I subscribed to a lie. Now only am I truly miserable." She paused, weeping, and then continued. "I thought with horror, my sweet lady, that you should believe your Justine, who your blessed aunt had so highly honoured, and whom you loved, was a creature capable of a crime which none but the devil himself could have perpetrated. Dear William, dear blessed child, I shall soon see you again in heaven, where we shall all be happy, and that consoles me, gone as I am to suffer ignominy and death." "Oh, Justine, forgive me for having one moment distrusted you. Why did you confess? But do not mourn, my dear girl. I will everywhere you proclaim your innocence and force belief. Yet you must die. You, my playfellow, my companion, my more than sister. I can never survive so horrible a misfortune." "Dear sweet Elizabeth, do not weep. You ought to raise me with thoughts of a better life, and elevate me from the petty cares of this world of injustice and strife. Do not you, excellent friend, drive me to despair. I will try to comfort you, but this, I fear, is an evil too deep and poignant to admit of consolation, for there is no hope. Yet heaven bless thee, my dearest Justine, without resignation and a confidence elevated beyond this world. Oh, how I hate its shrews and mockeries! When one creature is murdered, another is immediately deprived of life in a slow, torturing manner, and then the executioners, their hands yet reeking with the blood of innocents, believe that they have done a great deed. They call this retribution. Hateful name. When that word is pronounced, I know greater, more horrid punishments are going to be inflicted than the gloomiest tyrant has ever invented to satiate his utmost revenge. Yet this is not consolation for you, my Justine, unless indeed that you may glory in escaping from such a miserable den. Alas! I would I were in peace with my aunt and my lovely William, escaped from a world which is hateful to me, and the visages of men which I abhor." Justine smiled languidly. "This, my dear lady, is despair and not resignation. I must not learn the lesson that you would teach me. Talk of something else, something that would bring you peace and not increase of misery." During this conversation, I had to retire to the corner of the prison room, where I could conceal the horrid anguish that possessed me. Despair! Who dared talk of that? The poor victim, who on the morrow was to pass the dreary boundary between life and death, felt not as I did, such deep and bitter agony. I gnashed my teeth and ground them together, uttering a groan that came from my innermost soul. Justine started. When she saw who it was, she approached me and said, "Dear sir, you were very kind to visit me. You, I hope, do not believe that I am guilty." I could not answer.
No, Justine,
said Elizabeth.
He is more convinced of your innocence than I was, for even when he heard that you had confessed, he did not credit it.
I truly thank him. In these last moments, I felt the sincerest gratitude towards those who think of me with kindness. How sweet is the affection of others to such a wretch as I am! It removes more than half my misfortune, and I feel as if I could die in peace, now that my innocence is acknowledged by you, dear lady, and your cousin. Thus the poor sufferer tried to comfort others and herself. She indeed gained the resignation she desired, but I, the true murderer, felt the never-dying worm alive in my bosom, which allowed no hope or consolation. Elizabeth also wept, which was unhappy, but hers was also the misery of innocence, which, like a cloud that passes over the fair moon, for a while hides, but cannot tarnish its brightness. Anguish and despair had penetrated into the corner of my heart. I bore a hell within me, which nothing could extinguish. We stayed several hours with Justine, and it was with great difficulty that Elizabeth could tear herself away. "I wish," cried she, "that I were to die with you. I cannot live in this world of misery." Justine assumed an air of cheerfulness, while she was difficultly repressed her bitter tears. She embraced Elizabeth and said in a low voice of half-suppressed emotion, "Farewell, my sweet lady, dearest Elizabeth, my beloved and only friend. May heaven in its bounty bless and preserve you. May this be your last misfortune that you will ever suffer. Live and be happy, and make others so." As we returned, Elizabeth said, "You know not, my dear Victor, how much I am relieved, now that I trust in the innocence of this unfortunate girl. I never could again have known peace if I had been deceived in my reliance on her. For the moment that I did believe her guilty, I felt an anguish that I could not long have sustained. Now my heart is lighted. The innocent suffers, but she whom I thought amiable and good has not betrayed the trust I reposed in her, and I am consoled." Amiable cousin, such were your thoughts, mild and gentle as your own dear eyes and thoughts. But I was a wretch, and none ever conceived in the misery that I then endured. End of Volume 1. Referring to others as creature rather than people. Yeah. It's I can't remember in what context. That was a long chapter, but if you think about like what it takes to put harm on a child, I feel like referring them as like demons or monsters or creatures is fairly accurate. If it was when he was talking about his monster, to be fair, Frankenstein's monster is technically not a human, but that also raises into question what makes someone human. It's kind of a whole like ethical thing. Obviously, as much as I joke about hating children, I do think it takes a specific type of malice and disturbed nature to ever genuinely wish harm on a child or enact harm on a child, especially considering I think it was said that William was like 5, so this is someone who strangled a 5-year-old child, which is why when they're thinking Justine did murder the kid, they're acting very harsh and judgmentally, because it's a very serious crime. But yeah, that was the end of volume 1. I hope you guys are enjoying it. It's a rather sad time. It'll only get a little bit more sad. But I know one of the... It's been a while since I've read Frankenstein. This is kind of... I'm experiencing it all for the basically the first time again, because I've forgotten everything that happens in this book. I'm definitely going into volume 2 blind. I think I know what happens with a certain wedding. That's about it for my memory of it, though. But I do believe that law and justice is a relevant theme in this, because I think there is another court case towards the end of the novel. And as you can see in this, a lot of it was... I mean, they wouldn't have put it in for no reason. The innocence in the case, and even though she was innocent, she still had to suffer unjustly. Although we don't actually know if she's innocent or not. I think it's to be presumed, but that is also us trusting Victor Frankenstein and trusting Justine when she says that she's innocent. It's hard to tell. You just got in and all you heard was strangling a child? Yeah. A child died. Victor Frankenstein's younger brother Henry? Not Henry, I keep calling him Henry. Victor Frankenstein's younger brother William was strangled to death. And we just saw the murder trial where their old family friend, servant, girl, she was accused of committing the murder. She proclaims to be innocent, and Victor thinks that it was the monster's doing. But either way, no matter who was guilty, who was innocent, Justine has been sentenced guilty on all charges. Scary. Scary, scary. Unfortunately, if you have just come in, you have just come in at the end of reading time. We've stopped at a very good point at the end of volume 1. I'm gonna have to change how I format the YouTube titles. I'm now gonna have to include volume 2, I suppose. Because the chapters start from chapter 1 again, so I don't think I can put Reading Frankenstein Part 4, Chapter 1. Guys, I've lost all my save data on this book. We have to start it again at chapter 1. But yeah, let's go look for someone to raid over on Twitch side. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming out for Frankenstein reading. We will be back next week on Wednesday for more Frankenstein. I do have a schedule for next week. I guess I should say that for the rest of this week. So, no stream tomorrow or Friday. We're going to have Devil May Cry in the morning at 9:30 a.m. PST on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday night, probably around 6:30 p.m. PST, we're going to be doing a hand cam Lego building stream. We're going to build me. We're building me as a Lego. That's going to be very fun. I need to find the instructions again, but I have all the pieces, so we can do that Saturday night. Then Monday, I think I'll make an actual schedule for next week, just because I actually do have a lot of concrete plans. Monday, we're going to be playing Resident Evil Outbreak with Hayami and Aqua. Tuesday, we're going to be over on Sleepy's stream for their birthday. Wednesday, more Frankenstein. And then on the weekend, Devil May Cry. I might do another stream. I might do a Digimon stream Friday night, just to get that in there. Because I did say Digimon will be Monday, but I forgot that I forgot we have an Outbreak collab on Monday, so that'll probably be not this Friday night, but next Friday night. But for raid today, Sleepy is live and doing art. So we're gonna go raid Sleepy. boo, boo, boo. They've got their birthday and subathon next week. I think starting on the 22nd, which will be on their stream at some point. I think playing some games. But yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful night. I'll see you sometime in the future. I don't know when. I don't know where. I don't know how. But I will see you. But for now, get out of my house. It's weird that you're still here. Like, I left. I know I keep leaving the door unlocked for you squatters. But there's a time limit for when you're allowed to be in my house. It's not raining outside, so you're not going to get all wet this time. But you do have to go. You're going to hide under the bed? No, you're not, Babishki. I check there. I check for monsters every night. I'll find you. You're a bird. I can throw you out. You can fly away. All right. That's all I have to say. I've done my preamble to make sure everyone's caught up with the schedule and the plans. Check your walls? Huh? I'm gonna bring a sledgehammer to those walls. Just you wait. Just you wait. Just you wait. That's from Alexander Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda. Alright, bye-bye.
If I put him in the campaign, though, it's just that he TPKs you guys. So, like, I know. She's like, I don't want us to beat him.